Thanks for tuning in to another edition of The Vermont Voice. I'm Todd Pronto, filling in as host for The Vermont Voice, and the guest today is normally the host. So where I would normally be the guest, today I'm the host, and who would normally be the host would be the guest. Does that make sense? If you followed us this far, welcome. Scott Wheeler is the publisher of the Northland Journal, a successful business in the Northeast Kingdom and, well, I guess around the country. You've shipped that thing everywhere, don't you?
We almost go to 50 states.
Almost?
Yeah, almost. Was that really confusing when you started off? Because you sounded really confused.
Well, I've been the guest on this show before.
Right. And
never the host.
What the viewers didn't see was before we went live is, it was so confusing for me to be sitting over here.
On the wrong side.
That, yeah, it was really strange.
Yeah.
Of course, I got a strange guy sitting next to me, too.
You do. I feel bad about that.
Right.
But anyway, the Northland Journal, you and your wife, of course,
yeah,
put it out.
My wife, Penny, yep. We've been doing it now for 11 years. Can you believe that?
Now, it started off as the Kingdom
historical,
yeah.
But then the thing is people have this phobia of history. Mm-hmm. You think of history like you learned in school. Like, there really are some great history teachers, but there are some history teachers that you'd rather watch paint dry.
Yeah, you got to make it interesting, I think.
And I think that's it. I feel that history, a lot of history, can actually be really interesting. It's like, I was on Vermont Public Radio back a few months ago, and they said, well, what would you do to spark a kid's interest in history? Well, first of all, having a kid love history, that's very rare, because at that, kids are, they're focused on the here and now, or the future. They're not so much worried about the past. Well, what I said is to try to bring in something local. It's like, for example, I use this. The founder of the Boston Bruins, the man who brought the NHL to this country, was born and raised in Newport Center, Vermont.
Yeah.
And in stuff like that is you bring as much of the you bring as much history you can, make it local,
right,
and then expand outwards. Like, I've had on, Vietnam vets and World War II vets right on this show, and you can learn about those two wars in your history books, but you probably learn more about those wars just sitting here producing this show.
It was more interesting to me than when I was learning about it in school.
Right, because these were men who they fought in the battles that we have only read about.
Right. Speaking of history, it's not history yet, but I think it's going to go down in history. The big demolition derby that we had a month before the Orleans County Fair.
Right. Right. You're talking about the sheriff cruisers.
Yes. Now, what a lot of people may or may not know, of course, it's made national news, and worldwide. It's worldwide. That's right. The BBC. Right. The photos that people have seen around the world were taken by this guy right here.
And it was my biggest regret is, although I don't do news anymore.
Right.
I worked for the Chronicle for years, and I got a lot of good training there. I still can't get news out of my system. Mm-hmm. But I was supposed to be right next door at Delabrier's, where my brother works. I was supposed to be picking up his truck. Instead, you might find this hard to believe.
Okay.
I got running my mouth down at the Wood Knot Bookshop. Really? I know that's hard to believe. Weird. I was running my mouth.
I can't imagine.
And I was late getting there. If I had been early, I would have gotten the great shots of it happening. Now, granted, I'm going to tell you right now, and I will tell you, it was stupid. Mr. Peon is not a hero. I understand some of his frustrations, but running over a bunch of police cruisers with a tractor is not. I'm going to tell you, I have interviewed many heroes in my life, and Mr. Peon is no hero.
No.
But I will say, from a newsman's perspective, or at least a recovering newsman, that was a story. And
that's definitely a story.
So I arrived. I actually had a unnamed lawman call me up and say, "You wouldn't believe this. We've just been called to the sheriff's department, and for cruisers being crushed by a tractor." Honestly, I'm used to people exaggerating.
Yeah.
And what I thought was a tractor had been going by and sideswiped a couple cruisers. I honestly did not.
Or tried to pull in and ran into one.
Right. That's what I thought. I thought there was a little bit of hyperboil there. So I went up there, and all I've got to say is it was so surreal to see those crushed cruisers. And so the thing is I took my photos of the officers. I took them of the cars, and then I went home, posted them on Facebook.
Right.
This should be words of warning to anybody. You know, you're on Facebook, right?
I am. I'm very careful about it. Being a public figure, especially, I don't want too much of my personal life really out there, so I hold back from posting a lot of.
But if you were having a tiff with one of your brothers, would you put that out on the air that he's a no good SOB?
No. I do it when we're not having.
Right.
I do it just for fun, but no, I would never do that.
The reason I say that is this is a perfect example of why you need to be careful about what you post out there. I am not ashamed of posting those photos because it was news. But I posted those photos, and within seconds, people were commenting, and within minutes, I had the media contacting me. Once it went to the Associated Press, it went everywhere. Within, I would say, 15 minutes of me posting those photos, they had been picked up by major news outlets, and it was everywhere. And I couldn't go to bed until at least 11:30 that night because I had the media contacting me. Who do we contact? Who should we contact? Can we have permission to use those photos? From being a former news person and a writer myself, I was more than happy to direct them to the police chief of Newport, to the sheriff's department. I helped them with their contact information. I personally stayed out of the story because I wasn't there. Right. And it was still kind of.
You didn't comment. You just said...
No. I let other people comment. So you might think, some people might think, well, why, you're a history person, why do you get involved in this? Well, because history had to start somewhere.
Right.
This is going to be a.
Well, you can do the year anniversary next year in the journal.
Right. And the fact of the matter is, no matter what we think about what happened, that event is forever etched into the history of this region. It is going to be something. You're going to be sitting in the nursing home someday as a patient, and you're going to be remembering this incident.
Yeah, I mean, it's and the way it spread, like you said, I got a text from my brother, who works just up the road from where my office is, which is just up the road from where this all happened. He says, "Hey, did you hear that some guy crushed all these cars with a tractor?" And I said, "No." And the Orleans County Police Department. And I said, "No." But at the same time, I'd ordered lunch from Little G's and had it delivered. And the guy said, "Sorry, it took me so long. I had to come up the other way. There's all these cops down at my Pasumsic Savings Bank." And I said, "Huh?" And while I was eating my lunch, I literally clicked on Facebook, saw your photos. Somebody had already commented that it was Roger Peon that did it. Like, before it was even confirmed by the news or the police or anything, because somebody must have seen him get taken out of the tractor and arrested. So within 5 minutes of my brother texting me, while I was eating my lunch, I knew who did it. I'd seen pictures of it. 5 years ago, we would have had to wait to see that on the 6 o'clock news, or maybe see it in the paper the next morning.
I love this instant social media. I think as a businessman, it's great, but there is some real, there's some horrible stories that come out of social media. Well, not just the way people use it to rip each other apart, and I don't mean everybody. Most people are very responsible. It connects people. I'm connected to people now that I would never have ever become reacquainted with or acquainted with. But on the other hand, there was a recent death. Well, in the last year, there was a death, a two-person death. I don't want to go into too much into detail. And a person was out of this area. He was obviously reading Facebook, and he piped up and said, "Is my father dead?" That is how he learned that his father had died, because social media is instantaneous, and that's how come I'm very careful with that kind of stuff too, about announcing somebody's death or something. Just other than a movie star, say if you died, you're like a celebrity.
Oh yeah, huge.
But that's the one thing. Yeah. There is that downside too.
There is, and you're not even as involved as some people are. I mean, you don't have it on your phone, do you?
Oh no.
I mean, it's a click away.
You know what is? I have the dumbest phone that was made for dummies, because I'm a dummy when it comes to technology.
Did you see that right there? It was that fast. I'm on Facebook right now. Right on my phone. So
get a chuckle. I did.
Of course.
I did. Because I think we've all been frustrated at something that we're very possibly we had been thrilled at that moment to have run over our enemy's car with a tractor or something,
or even your computer.
Right. But I think it's okay. I think it's okay to laugh to a degree.
Sure.
But I'm not going to cast judgment on Mr. Peon. I don't know what his mindset was, but I think I would question if you're capable of going into a parking lot and run over cruisers where there are armed human beings inside. What more could you have done? I'm just glad that we are not experiencing the horrors. I'm glad we're able to laugh and that we're not burying people, though.
Oh, absolutely. And how different of a scene could it have been, say, one of the sheriffs pulled in at the moment it was happening, or they'd seen it happen? They could have apprehended him right there. I don't know how. I don't know. It's hard to see what kind of mindset somebody's in, but
right. The other thing is, I think sometimes, because I have some issues with some lawmen myself. Like, I have never gotten a speeding ticket, so it isn't sour grapes. I think some, like even Paul Duquette, who recently retired as the police chief, has said that some officers or some of the training has lost its way.
Yeah.
It's not it's an us against them mentality. But I think those those officers are few and far in between. They're not all bad. I wouldn't want their job. I don't want to knock at somebody's door and say, hey, we regret to tell you, but your loved one passed away in an accident, or however they do it is.
Or knock on somebody's door and face a gun on the other side because
Right.
you're trying to arrest them, you know?
Personally,
It's
I
a
think,
tough job.
Right. And personally, I think this is a great opportunity for some true, honest dialogue, because I think there's a serious problem of this us and them mentality that some people have with the officers, but I think some officers become jaded, or and they gain it, and I think there needs to be some dialogue before somebody is hurt. And I'll commend, I'm not sure who I should be commending, but I think the Newport City Police Department, who's a very young group of people, I personally think I've seen some instances in this state where lawmen have shot people underneath very questionable circumstances. I believe that they could have probably have justifiably shot him and probably have gotten away with it. Instead, they took the extra mile and no shots were fired, because my beef is we've had some really, really good officers who's never gotten the credit that they deserve because they were good at talking. As I think of one is John Vinan. John Vinan was an officer here since the 1970s, retired a few years ago. When I interviewed John said, listen, I'm a talker, I'm not a fighter. He said, I can't beat my way out of a wet paper bag. And he saved so many lives because of his ability not to only talk to people in tough situations, but he also, in day-to-day life, he got to know the people. And so when something did go bad, he was
I think that's part of it. I think you were talking about how some officers are more military-like, I guess.
Right.
But you should be able to approach an officer and with problems and not feel intimidated. However, I think another thing that you're kind of hinting at is they should have, you have to have respect for the law.
Right.
If we didn't have officers and we didn't have laws and we didn't have rules, it would be chaotic.
Right.
So I think that's where these people that are calling him a hero, you know, if you really think about it, if we didn't have any police, what would happen?
Right.
You know?
I think some of us are, I think some of the people have watched a little bit too much Dukes of Hazzard and that.
Yeah. Well, it's a very Vermont thing to do,
Right.
I'd say.
And, although I have no problem with releasing my photos to the world, because they would have come, because the only reason mine were used was because they were the first ones.
Right.
It would have been somebody else's. Although I have no shame in that, the only thing I think about is, you do know, though, that while people are calling Mr. Peon a hero, if you really read the blogs and the news links, that also made us look like a bunch of fools.
You think so?
You read the you really read the comments, and people love to stereotype people into certain groups. It's like all Democrats are this, all Republicans are this, and all those officers are horrible people. We lump. Well, now we are all being lumped into those Vermonters, or those Northeast Kingdom, or like I read one, and for some reason it really got underneath my skin. They called us. They said, "What do you expect? It is the Kingdom, D-U-M-B," and so.
At least they spelt it right. Half the time when people do that, they spell it wrong.
Right, and so it was an interesting thing, and I'm sure the legal system will take care of it. But in this, and I'm not a bleeding heart liberal, but I will tell you this is, I truly hope Mr. Peon gets the help he needs. I do. Mm-hmm. I really hope the best for him, because of the fact is, he didn't just do that on a He didn't just do that on a whim. I suspect there's some very serious
There's some rage going
underlying
on.
issues. I don't mean only between him and the department, but I think there's other issues going on in his life that he needs to face. And I have the utmost sympathy for the plight of the Orleans County Sheriff's Department. The only thing, as I said, I hope we can get out of this is maybe get some dialogue going, and I don't mean hollering at each other, is what do we expect? What do we expect of our lawmen? Because they do have a job to do.
Right.
But, are they, for example, are they policing themselves when they do know they have a problem within their ranks?
Yeah, it's like human resources, I guess. It's always hard to look into that, but
right. And because I'll tell you,
admit fault,
I've from my years as a reporter with the Chronicle, I dealt with many lawmen, and the vast majority of them are great human beings. The one department I can't speak high enough about is the U.S. Border Patrol. Mm-hmm. The men who patrol the border, not the ones who guard the border at the ports of entry. As you know, my buddy is Fernando Beltran, the head of the Border Patrol, is no finer group of people. And I truly believe that most lawmen are like that, but there's,
Yeah, it's not Mayberry anymore.
Right. Well, that's it. I think that's really true.
What about this, though? Is it a typo, or is he really facing 68 years? Or is that 6 to 8 years behind bars?
Well, but that was an interesting...
Because that's pretty intense. I mean...
Well, I was reading in the paper that they're going to charge him with destruction of property, but they're going to charge for him for each car he destroyed that they want to.
Right.
But on the other hand I know his attorney said, wait a minute here, if somebody goes into a house, they don't have separate charges for each item you steal. Like if you went in to my house and stole this coffee cup and this timer, you wouldn't be charged with 2 counts of theft. It'd be, one count. So but the legal system will take care of itself. It'll come out. And I just hope there's no copycats.
Yeah, you always have to worry about that. I mean, when you had the gunman in was it Colorado?
Right.
Suddenly you hear people say they're scared to go to the movie theater. You shouldn't be, but on the other hand, there could have been, fortunately, there was not a copycat incident of that. But however, there was that church that was shot up.
Right.
Can't remember where that was.
Oh, yeah, in Wisconsin.
Yeah, so...
And
do you think that was a copycat of the Batman thing?
It's hard to say because they all involve... those 2 incidents involved people who had... especially the one in Colorado was known serious mental health issues.
Right.
And I believe the one in Wisconsin... Now, don't get me wrong. There's many fine people with mental health issues who are... we meet in our day-to-day lives who have, but I think one thing, and I hate to say this, is because as I said, I'm out there, I do my writing, I do my history, and I still, I dabble in the news occasionally, like in this case, but I think sometimes the media fans the flames.
Oh, sure.
Granted, you could not have that incident occur on the Derby Road and not mention it. No. That isn't. But what I'm saying is, I think sometimes it just continues the fan thing. It's like, for example, do you realize that person chose to run those tractors, to run those police cars over? He continues to get front page, and it was front page news. But sure. I bet you most people have not even heard about that poor community-oriented couple from Jay, Vermont, the Morans. They were just going about life. They just left church, and they were wiped out in the middle of the road by a driver. That story was
like the third page.
Third page or something, stuck in there as like an afterthought.
Right.
And there's, to me, there's something.
Well, here's the mentality. You're not going to sell newspapers with that. And I'll tell you, that day, you were hard-pressed to find a newspaper if you waited too long
Oh, I know.
in the afternoon.
Oh, no. You know, I do understand that
it's like a community interest thing.
It does sell. But on the other hand there's a lot of people who knew and loved that couple, and I can't think of right offhand of another accident that, took both, can you imagine both of your mother and father dying in one accident? And then can you imagine realizing that some joker took away, essentially took
Their
away,
memorial, to a certain extent.
Yeah, it's stuck in there. I think, I just was very disappointed. And I know I'm not the only one. I've seen that on Facebook.
Yeah, but I think as humans, we're very pop culture oriented, and who's going to? I mean, as somebody, you're going to gravitate towards that tractor story more so, especially if you don't know the couple that was involved. And I think it's just because that's how we are as people.
But on the other hand there's a whole front page.
Well,
You'd think that you could have
put something else in there.
Here's a question.
They did. The dog park was on the other part.
Here's a question. Here's a question I have of you, because I've often bounced this around. Even when I was a reporter, I was not an ambulance chaser. Mm-hmm. I did not go to people's funerals. I did not bother people in their time of grief. What is there a purpose of having demolished cars on the front page where people died? I'm not quite. I can go back and forth on it. What do you think?
Well, it's always. I mean, it's a tough one. Because I believe, as I was saying, we as humans are just gravitated towards stuff like that. Like, September 11th. Right. If those photos weren't published worldwide, would it? I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say, but people have a genuine interest in September 11th and the towers falling, and everybody's seen it happen because the news captured it. But in a small local town, it's hard to say. Maybe like the cop cars, nobody was hurt.
Right.
Yeah, if there were. There's that fly again. If there were actually police that got hurt and those pictures were in there, that could be a different story. It's a fine line to cross because people are interested in it, but you've also got the family that's grieving, the people that know the family, and it's right there on the front page. Or I don't know. What do you think?
See, I can totally flip flop on it. Is on one hand I think it must be horrible for the family members to see that car that their loved one died in.
Sure.
But then on the other hand, I think sometimes do those images serve as a reminder to us? Does it, because I'll tell you, I look at some of these accident photos. Now, I don't do it. I haven't done it in the past, but sometimes I look at them and I think it might make me more wary, and just to remember, we like to sit here and think that we're going to be here in 200 years because we are mortal. Or no, we are immortal, but we are really mortal. And I think occasionally when we're going down the road, as we're talking on our cell phones, drinking a coffee, eating a Big Mac, that we forget that this could be us. And so I go back and forth.
But I think, but as humans, we are as sick as that is, we are fascinated with it. And I'll give you a great example. Like, I'm a musician. Okay. I'm very followed into the history. I loved Elvis as a kid growing up. A big Nirvana fan. And I'll be on the internet every once in a while, and I'll see Elvis Presley's, death photo, and I'll click on it because there's something about me that's like, I want to see him collapsed by the toilet. There is no such photo. People just try to. That fly is going to have a photo of itself. I'll tell you what.
That.
Sorry, PETA.
I was going to say that could be in trouble with PETA.
But and I click on it and I want to see it and it's not there. But every once in a while there are photos of celebrities that I've seen, and as soon as I click on it, I'm like, why did I do that? But I think it's just a fascination that humans have. Whether it's deranged or whether maybe I'm deranged, that could be.
Well, it's like, for example, I can think of an incident where they thought that a snowmobile went through the ice near the Long Bridge in Newport.
Okay, yep.
And
that's really thin ice there,
right.
too. Yeah.
But apparently, what had happened was the snow machine had broken, but it had just kept going. The ice had broken,
okay.
And but there was all people lined up there waiting as the divers, and you knew what they were. And I suspect, in a weird way, when they announced that there was no body down here, I'm not saying there was like shouts of protest, but I bet you there was a little disappointment that those people had waited there and they got to see nothing. Yeah, we are sick people.
We
sometimes.
are. I admit it. I mean, I've sat on YouTube and watched countless the September 11th stuff. Watched it countless times. I don't know why. It just.
So if you see me smashed up on the side of the road when I'm running, you're going to do a little drive-by and.
I'll stop. I'll take some pictures. I'll put it on Facebook. See if we can get you worldwide. You know.
Yeah.
It is. It is weird. I'm not sure what it is about the human instinct, but
I don't know.
It's there. Now you've been in this. You're not so much breaking news as much these days, although you just broke a really big one by chance.
Yep.
That could have been anybody else, really.
Oh, that could have been
right place, right time.
Yeah, right. But that's kind of what news is, though. You know, right place, right time, and you know.
But it's good for you. It got your name out there. I mean.
Yeah, Northland Journal.
You're on the BBC.UK and photo credit Northland Journal.
Yeah, that was it. Because that's all I asked for. Just give me photo credit and. But no, most of the time now I focus on history. Like I've been on the History Channel. Every once in a while there'll be a rerun of a show I was on, and people say, "Hey, it was how the states were formed or how the states were shaped."
Oh,
I'm on a segment of that.
I've seen it. I've never seen I'm assuming you're the Vermont one.
Right.
I've never seen that one.
And you probably could understand this from being a musician, at least maybe. If you're cutting an album. I don't know if it's anything like a movie clip or a show clip. Is like if they interview me for an hour, that melts down to about 2 minutes.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And so I'm always surprised on what I see come out, and sometimes it's like, really, that's what they thought was important.
Yeah, it's everybody's probably has a different view on.
Right.
But so, you started out though. You're out of high school because you didn't go to college, right?
I didn't know. Actually, I did. I did things a little mixed up. I had my wife and I got married at 18 and 19. We had.
You were the older or younger?
I was the old timer. My wife liked older men.
The old 19-year-old, yeah.
We got married.
Robbing the cradle.
We got married, and not only did we have one kid, we ended up having identical twin sons who are now 26.
Oh, they're the oldest.
Yeah, and then our daughter's 21. But I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life.
So what were you doing at the time?
Well, I was working at Columbia Forest Products as a laborer, and I knew that wasn't no disrespect to people who work at Columbia, because ironically, my son works in Maine for Columbia, and has an administrative role. Mm-hmm. I work the floor, and no disrespect to the workers, but I knew that wasn't what I wanted to do for a living. Now, here's what really happened, though, is I don't know if you've ever had those, like I know you've led a straight and narrow life, and you've never made a mistake, and it's just all pretty...
I'm perfect.
Yeah, perfect. I have never had a speeding ticket, yet on the other hand is, I look at some of the things I've done in life and I think, and why did I do that? Well, when my boys were a couple months old, they kept having, they kept on kind of like stopping breathing, and well, their doctor was not very understanding. You know, we were these young parents who didn't really know anything because we were young parents. Well, we were very good young parents. So one day we were bringing him over to the emergency room against the wishes of the doctor, because there was nothing wrong with him. Heard him cry at the intersection of Union and East Main Street, and looked back, they were fine. And we got to the hospital, and I still remember it. Nick was dead. He was dead, full cardiac arrest. And I can joke about this now because, you know, it was a long, hard road, but I ran him into the hospital, and that poor woman at the emergency room desk, looking at me, out of breath, and she looked and saw he was dead. And she said, "How long has it been?" And I said, 2 minutes tops. And no, she handed off the kid at the same time, and it was code 99. I don't know where those doctors came from, but code 99 was full cardiac arrest or something like that. Doctors were everywhere. Bang, 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 bang. They were everywhere. And so the thing is, to make a long story short, they had a rare calcium deficiency. It was brought on by a rare. They had a calcium deficiency brought on by a rare kidney disorder, and they almost had a 0% chance of survival. Oh. And one of them ended up in Burlington, one ended up here, and then you can call it a miracle, or you can call it luck. When they developed what they thought was going to be a treatment, but not a cure, but they basically said, don't get your hopes up, because they said, no way is this going to be a cure. That treatment ended up being a cure, and they have never been sick really since. And that Nick, who had died, and you got to remember, Kurt, as an identical twin, he was as sick or sicker than Nick was. It just he had more body mass, so he didn't die. So Nick was resuscitated, and this year, 26 years later, he came in 35th in the world in the Boston Marathon.
That's amazing.
And so how does that go with my story? The story is, once you see your kid dead, you see how fast life can go. You better make the best of your life. And that's when I went back to college, and I did my thing. I have my degree in psychology. But when I was going to college, my advisor said, you know, you're really weak in writing. And, okay, well, thanks. And he made me take all kinds of writing classes. And well, I got out. I didn't use my psychology degree very much, but he turned me into a writer. I guess I'm okay at it.
So you were going to be a psychologist?
Well, I have my psychology degree, so if afterwards you need some help.
I was going to say, you could, all right.
You know, I could probably get a few dollars from you.
You probably could.
No.
Was journalism more just...
No, journalism, what happened was, a lot of things in my life, you can call it fluke, you can call it a miracle, or I look at it as it was meant to be. I worked at Northeast Kingdom Mental Health for 10 years, and...
So you did use your psychology degree, okay.
But here's something that happened was, this is another long story, I'll keep short. My mother never knew her mother, because my grandmother died when my mother was only 3. They lost all contact with the maternal family, and my mother didn't even know where her mother was from. And so I tracked them down to Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, and these were my mother's first cousins. These were not distant. These were her first cousins on her mother's side. We went up for a family reunion. And then what happened was, I came home and I wrote an article about this, my mother's journey from not knowing her family to going for this reunion, and my search. And the Chronicle basically contacted me and said, hey, would you like to do some stringing work for us? You know, stringing is just occasional work. And I said, you've really called the wrong person. I said, I'm no writer. They said, no, we think we can work with you. And sure enough, Well, I got into writing an occasional article. I loved it. It wasn't the writing so much, but the meeting the people.
Sure, yeah.
I look back on my writing career, whether it's with the Chronicle or with my 11 years of the Journal, I look back and I think, wow, what a great ride it has been. I lead such a boring life compared to some of the people I have interviewed.
Sure.
So I went from stringing, I went to part-time to full-time at the Chronicle. And
you had hair?
Yeah, I did when I started.
Yeah.
Because you remember in high school, or even when I got married, I got my hair trimmed up to here, and I got my bangs cut to right about here. I keep my bangs back here now to keep them out of my eyes.
Yeah. I seen your wedding picture. It was in the paper, like.
Yeah. I had a lot. I had a lot of hair, and so the thing is so I then started up. Well, first of all, I published my first book, which was Rum Runners and Revenue, was Prohibition in Vermont. Well, that was done on a lark too, and that ended up being a bestseller. And I will credit one person who supported me silently. Well, he at least behind the scenes gave me a lot of support, and he probably doesn't know how much it meant, was Howard Frank Mosier. The real writer in the area. He's,
right.
I will never be a Howard Frank Mosier, but he gave me a lot of just occasional, I don't mean every day, as he really encouraged me to write that first book.
I've always wanted to read it, but it's like out of print or something now, right?
I know somebody.
I think you need a second edition.
I know somebody who has some.
Do you?
Yeah. So the
See, when it first came out, I was still like in my early 20s.
Right.
I was working at the Derby store. You were selling it there. I wasn't interested in it.
Right.
But now that I'm in my 30s, I'm kind of like, I should have read that book. It'd be neat to hear about
that's
Prohibition.
and the thing is so then the Northland Journal arose out of my book, because we all have a story to tell.
Sure.
We do, and we needed we have some great news. I might dish newspapers occasionally, but we really have some great newspapers in this area. We have some great reporters. Not all, but most are.
Well, yeah.
They really try their hardest, and I wanted to have a medium where people could share stories that you might not read anywhere else. Like for example, I've interviewed people who survived the Depression, and when I listened to them, their mindset was so much different than some of ours today. One of the first things they will do is they will say the Depression was hard, but we did it, and we did it without public handout. They're so proud that they didn't take handouts. But now, I think handouts, our safety network is great, except for I think sometimes we're handicapping people to make it so they don't want to work.
People are always going to take advantage of any help that you give them.
Right.
Not everybody.
Right.
Few people will.
Right.
But yeah, I've never spoken to anyone that lived through the Great Depression, but watching you interview the Vietnam vets and the World War II people, and it's pretty amazing to because I'm relatively young. I wasn't even born when the Vietnam War started, or World War II, obviously. But it's neat you see it on the History Channel, you see it on the Travel Channel, you read about it in books, but in real life, and you've talked to people that, you've uncovered what the Boston Bruins started in the area. You've got Red Sox pitchers that live in the area. You find all these little neat little.
Or it's like even some little teeny things. Dan Collins, who works for the city of Newport.
Yep.
Dan contacted me one day. He found a high school graduation ring from, I want to think it was before it was about World War II time, I believe, and it had the name of the person on the inside. And he says, "Hey, I'd like to get this back to the owner." And I said, "Well, let's see what we can do." I hunted. I'm going to tell you, I thought that would be an easy one. I had no luck. So one of my subscribers, Peter Barton, who is a former state trooper turned private investigator, he decided to adopt the project, and he tracked that person to Georgia, not Georgia, Vermont, but Georgia, the state.
Right.
And when he called her up and said, this is, Peter Barton of the Barton Detective Agency or something, said, we have your high school rank. The woman was like, what? They had to do some research on Peter Barton before they talked to him, and then she was elated.
I bet.
And she doesn't, the only thing is she can not remember how that would have ended up in the toilet. It was in the sewer system, but she cleaned it all up and it looks just like new.
That's crazy. Yeah, you get to meet a lot of interesting people. How long have you been doing journalism now?
I've been doing the Journal for 11 years, but I've been doing it, my writing for 20 years. But I can interview people. My job is not to cast judgment on people. I've interviewed people that, to be honest, really pissed me off occasionally. Like I've interviewed just about every German soldier who lives around here, who fought for the German forces. Most of them are good, decent people who were caught up, and even one I've interviewed. He's still fighting that war, and occasionally he really, some of the things he says bothers me. But I don't. My job is not to cast judgment. It's to record.
Right.
It's to record, and
you're not doing commentary. You're doing
right.
Here's my question though. So you've been in it for a number of years. We're different in this area. It's a smaller area, but your journal, you're online.
Right.
You sell the printed version of it. Is newsprint a dying media? It is in the United States and a lot of the
not
big
in the
cities.
Journal.
Not for the Journal, but I'm saying like newspapers.
I think so. I think I've actually put a poll out because of the nature of the Northland Journal. People want it in their hands. It's history, and it's kept forever. But as for newsprint, I'm going to tell you, when newspapers first started going to news, when newspapers first started going to computers, I said, this is never going to work. Nobody's going to do it. Now, granted, I'm still a holdout. Nothing I like more than to kick back, read the Newport Daily Express, or the Orleans County Record, or the Chronicle, where I can hold it.
Right, yeah.
But I'm still one of those dinosaurs who still likes to have a book in my hand.
Yeah.
But I'm the older generation.
I'm the same way. I like to actually hold a book in my hand, but...
And they're also good for swatting the fly that would
I'm going
flying
to get that
here.
thing at some point. Yeah, you don't want to swat a fly with a Kindle.
No, that's true.
But I like, as far as reading a book, I like to be able to sit, read the book. News, though, I can get all the news I want on my phone, and I'm totally down with that, like with that technology. But you see just newspapers dying off in the big cities. How long before that comes here?
I think we're
a few more years.
Yeah, I think we're a few more years because we are holdouts, and a lot of people look at us being holdouts as being a bad thing. I don't think, some people think simple lives are simple people. Oh no, that isn't true at all. No. I don't know. I know as the papers are starting to go towards computers, but towards the internet, but I don't think it's totally going to go that route. Now, I will say this time about computers. When I started at the Chronicle, well, thank God I never started writing before there were computers, because I have the most atrocious handwriting. I mean, it's bad.
Is it?
But when I started at the Chronicle, we used these little Macs. It was like looking into a periscope that we had to type into.
Really?
And these were archaic things. And, now if you don't have a screen this big by that big, you think you're looking into a tiny, well, I got a screen for you.
I remember my father's he's an insurance salesman, his first laptop, and the thing was like this big, the screen was like this, and it was solely for word processing. It's pretty amazing.
You know where my first cell phone I ever heard of? Maxwell Smart. Remember Maxwell Smart? He kept it in his shoe. And actually, do you know another show that I look at, and when I think of technology, off the topic here, is when I was growing up, the Jetsons was
where is that?
The Jetsons, they showed technology that is actually happening now, and you also work at Moo.
Yeah,
so
sure.
is there going to be a day when, instead of saying "beam me up, Scotty," like they said on what show?
Oh, Star
Trek.
Yeah.
Instead, you're going to say, "Beam me up, Johnny." Johnny, our production guy,
right? Yeah.
At Moo, is he? Are you going to be able to beam yourself between the two places?
I'm not sure. Yeah, it's not. It is. You look at the Jetsons, and when George had to talk to Mr. Spacely, the screen came down and bang, he was up and they were talking. We're still not there. We've got Skype, but it's still not perfect.
I was talking to my buddy, and he's going to be watching this too, because he's one of the fans of this show. Is John Wilson, retired Sergeant Major John Wilson, Vietnam veteran.
Morning, yeah.
Now he's on the Newport City Council.
Yep.
There's a throwback when it comes to technology. John still likes his phone, where it's connected to the wall, connected to
to a cord. Yeah.
To a cord.
Well, I remember when you interviewed him and your phone went off, and people didn't see that. We cut it out, but Scott's cell phone went off. He said, "I forgot to shut it off," and one of them said, Gene, I think, said, "Mine's in my truck," and John says, "Mine's at home on the wall."
But hey, when you think of when you think of a new invention in your lifetime, what's the neatest invention that you can think of coming out?
I would say the iPod.
Right.
Because I'm a big music guy, and I had the Walkmans, and those are cool, but tapes, if you don't know what a cassette tape and a pencil mean.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, that was some frustrating times when your tapes got eaten. But then it came to the Sony Discman. I thought, this is cool, but have you ever tried walking with it? The laser would skip, the CD would skip, and then finally this little thing that's smaller than this comes out that holds 1,000 songs. Now they hold more than that, but I think the iPod, for me. The iPad is pretty amazing too, but what about for you?
All right, not for myself, but let me tell you, the people of the Depression have an interesting take on things. Well, I was interviewing one woman, and you know what is, a lot of these older people, they love to tell their stories, and sometimes they're not very inhibited either. They will tell you. One day I asked this, we were talking about the plumbing situation. A lot of people grew up in outhouses, so if you had to go to the throne, it was going outside,
right?
Or if you were lucky, you had a hallway out from the shed,
especially in the winter,
right? Well, I said, what's one of your best inventions that they came up with that you can? Well, and she said, I can still remember the day that my father brought home the first roll of toilet paper, and he sat all of us kids down and explained 2 sheets and 2 sheets only to be used when you go in the outhouse. Because until then, they were using the Sears and Roebuck's catalog, or the Montgomery Ward's. Oh yeah, that's what they used for toilet paper.
Oh, I thought you were going to say indoor plumbing.
Oh no,
they're talking about toilet paper.
Toilet paper, and they were. It's how out of touch sometimes we are. How good we have it. We really, we have it good. But on the other hand, we don't. Most of us don't appreciate it. I grew up poor, but I grew up working poor. I grew up in Skunk Hollow, right over the bank here from the studio. And we had a darn good childhood. Yeah, sometimes it involved running away from the game warden during poaching season on the Clyde River, but we had a good childhood. And but so you take these people who grew up in the Depression, they know what it's like to go without, but they also are great survivors. And sometimes they look at us and they look at how we whine and they think, these people have no clue what it's really like to go without.
Yeah, as we're in our in our cars, listening to satellite radio, talking on our cell phones, watching our GPS to see how we can get somewhere.
Right. Like I go over by the high school. Whenever I go over to the high school now, when I grew up, here I am. See, you know you're getting old when you start every sentence. When I grew up,
yeah,
you know
right.
you're getting old. There was a lot of Bondo buggies over there. You know, they were pieced together cars.
Yeah.
And now you go over there, you might have a BMW. Like when I grew up, there I go again. Bob Bowen, whose parents used to own Bowen's Taxi, he had one that he converted into a personal use. It had the checkered cab, it had the jump seats in it. Mm-hmm. He painted it like a police car, and you know, I think he called it his green pickle. And but how many more? So you asked me how many more years. Actually, come to think about it, you didn't ask me, so I'm telling you, is how many more years am I going to be recording history? Until I run out of old people or can I no longer breathe. And you know what? Some people say, I'm going to run out of old people. No. Never going to happen. They make them every single day.
Oh, yeah.
As we age, it's just going to, as one generation moves on to the great beyond, the other generation will be here to share their stories. And their stories are going to be different. But
sure.
Like we already have people who are now almost senior citizens yearning for the days of Jimmy's up on the, you know, up in
sure.
Derby line, and you know, our stories will just change. And here's my advice to you and to all the listeners: record your own stories, because you might as well tell the story the way you want it told, because people are going to make it. People make them up when you're alive. What do you think they're going to do? What do you think they're going to do to you when you're dead?
That's a good point. Yeah, no, you'll never run out of stuff to talk. I mean, my father's generation, we could talk about getting their first television, the moon landing, and Woodstock and all that stuff, you know.
Yeah. You know, if everybody was at Woodstock who said they were at Woodstock,
there would have been millions of people.
There must have been millions of people. Everybody's going to want. But you know what? In my closing, another current event that I can say that I was proud that I was at, and was as close to Woodstock as I'll ever get, is the Fish Festival.
Yeah.
And if you have never camped in a swamp surrounded by thousands of people, you haven't done anything in your life.
It's good. It was fun. I didn't see you there.
I was there for 3-4 days, and I was rocking on down in the swamp taking photos, and it was. Do I approve of everything that took place there? Absolutely not. Am I glad I was there? Absolutely.
Yeah. You got to experience it at least once in your life.
That's it.
You know what? We're going to wrap up real quick, but I used to go to, you know, Lollapalooza, Bonnaroo, similar festivals to this as a kid. And when the Fish concert came around, I was, I don't know, I guess late 20s or whatever. And I'm in there going, wow, I guess I grew up. Because I used to just think it was so much fun. And at the Fish Festival, I was like, these guys are crazy. You know, these guys need to grow up and get jobs. I guess I grew up in a hurry, man. I don't know.
See, it won't be long, and I'll be interviewing you. So, what was it like for you when you were a kid, the son of the mayor? As we've talked about before, you were like royalty, the son of the mayor.
I was. Pretty big deal.
Yeah. So.
Well, anyway, we're gonna wrap it up.
Did the role of the mayor? Did it come with security for the kids?
No, it did not. No. But I had my own security.
Oh, did you?
I had this big guy. He was a lot bigger than I was, taller. And if I was ever getting picked on, he'd come up to me and push those kids away and be like, "You leave him alone." So he was like a good buddy of mine. You know.
All right. Well, hey, it was really interesting being on this side of the table, because you've done this to me at the radio station, because you are the one who, if people love my shows, they love you. If they hate my show, you better watch out. They're going to drive a tractor over your car for recruiting me. But it wouldn't take much. It would take, with your Prius, it would probably take a garden tractor.
Yeah, you could just use a little Kubota or whatever. Well, anyway, another edition of the Vermont Voice. Scott Wheeler, the guest host. I'm the guest host. He's the guest who's usually the host. I think that made sense.
Yeah. You know what is, you confuse people enough on your radio show. So now you
well
can confuse them on my TV show.
Well, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again.
And thank you for hosting my show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for coming on your show with me.